The country of Sri Lanka is experiencing its worst ever economic crisis because there's fuel shortage, there's essential food item shortage and drug shortage, with people taking to the streets demanding the resignation of the president. What caused the crisis and how did Sri Lanka get here? I'm Mamata Balachandra and this is the whole story. Let's first start with what the problem is. There's been massive fuel shortage resulting in sporadic violence as well. At least 2 people have reportedly died while waiting at queues at these fuel pumps. Now, according to Al Jazeera, the country had then deployed troops at gas stations, and this has been going on for the last 1 month or so. Post that, we heard reports of school exams being cancelled due to acute shortage of paper. The country's 2 major newspapers subsequently suspended their publication over newsprint shortage and escalating costs. What happened subsequently was long blackouts, because towards the end of March, the country of 22 million people faced the longest ever blackout after it ran out of diesel. Now, media reports said that diesel, the main fuel for buses and commercial vehicles, was unavailable at stations across the island, and petrol was also in short supply. Lack of foreign currency to pay then for oil imports then aggravated the problem. Sri Lanka's power minister said street lights would be shut off to conserve power. Now, subsequently, prices of essentials went up by as much as 25%. The overall rate of inflation for February 2022, and this was according to Reuters, is measured by National Consumer Price Index on a year-on-year basis, stood at 17.5%, which is the highest since 2015. Sri Lanka's central bank has now doubled its key interest rates yesterday to tame inflation. We also saw doctors taking to the streets demanding a health emergency. This was reported by Reuters, saying that there was shortage of drugs and medicines across the country. They held banners which said, and I quote, "Strengthen people's right to live, declare a health emergency," end quote. Now, here's the problem. Sri Lanka relies heavily on its imports. So most of the things, especially essential items like petroleum, food, paper, sugar, lentils, medicines, a lot of it is imported. Now, lack of foreign currency means that the country does not have enough money to buy these commodities. According to Reuters, the country's foreign exchange reserves have plummeted by at least 70% in the last 2 years. Now, what's happened over the last couple of days is that 26 cabinet ministers have now resigned en masse following worsening crisis in the country, but the government has maintained that the president will not step down. Chief Government Whip Minister Johnston Fernando has stated in the parliament, and I quote, "May I remind you that 6.9 million people voted for the president as a government. We are clearly saying the president will not resign under any circumstances," end quote. In the meantime, Sri Lanka's main opposition party on Friday has announced that it will move a no-confidence motion against the government of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and is prepared to impeach the embattled leader if he fails to address the concerns of the people at the moment. A couple of things have led to the crisis that we're seeing in Sri Lanka at this point: mounting debt, economic mismanagement by successive governments, and lack of tourism and FDI at this point. According to Observer Research Foundation, Sri Lanka has massive foreign debt that it has borrowed, with a total accrued debt of $35 billion just in 2021. China accounts for nearly 20% of Lanka's foreign debt as well. Now, critics say that the other major problem is the economic mismanagement by successive governments. Now, the borrowings also coincided with a lot of things that happened. For instance, natural disasters such as heavy monsoons in Sri Lanka, to later a government ban on chemical fertilizers that decimated farmers' harvest. In 2019, there was also the Easter bombing that happened in Sri Lanka, and COVID in 2020 and subsequently in 2021 as well. Facing a massive deficit, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa slashed taxes in a doomed attempt to stimulate the economy, but that backfired, instead hitting the government's revenue. Now, JP Morgan analysts have estimated that Sri Lanka's gross debt servicing would amount to $7 billion this year, with the current account deficit coming in around $3 billion. According to central bank data obtained by Reuters, and this is a Reuters report which says Sri Lanka currently has about $2 billion in foreign exchange reserves against the $7 billion debt, the total debt this year alone that it has to pay off, including the $1 billion worth of notes maturing in July. Apart from these, of course, there is the plummeting foreign reserves. According to CNN, Sri Lanka then had to fall back on its foreign exchange reserves to pay off the government debt, shrinking its reserves from $6.9 billion in 2018 to $2.2 billion this year. Additionally, the Sri Lankan currency has devalued to almost SLR 90 against the US dollar since March 8th. So that hasn't helped either. Apart from this, in his address to the nation last week, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa had admitted that the country will have a trade deficit of $10 billion. This means that last year, Sri Lanka imported more than it has actually exported, which is problematic. According to the government data, the FDI coming into Sri Lanka has also decreased to $548 million in 2020 compared to $793 million in 2019. Now, this coupled with a drop in tourism has not helped as well. What is the country then doing about this? So far, it's sought help from its neighbors, India and China. India mostly, because India has recently extended a $1 billion line of credit to Sri Lanka. India has also sent food and fuel to the country. Now, the Rajapaksa government has also sought at least another $1 billion from India. Sri Lanka, and this is the latest information that has come in. Finance Minister of Sri Lanka has spoken to Reuters in an exclusive, where he said that Sri Lanka will need about $3 billion in external assistance within the next 6 months to help restore supplies of essential items, including food and fuel and medicines. The government is also going to look for support from other external sources, for instance, Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, and bilateral partners including China, the United States, Britain, and countries in the Middle East. Now, discussions are currently ongoing with China on a $1.5 billion credit line, a syndicated loan of up to $1 billion, and a request from Sri Lanka's president in January to restructure some of its debt. Sri Lanka also plans to seek help from the International Monetary Fund, and hence there is an advisory panel with experts that's now been appointed to resolve the debt crisis and also to engage with the IMF and to try and deal and resolve the situation in Sri Lanka so far. But what is happening at the moment is protests by civilians, people taking to the streets demanding resignation from the president. The president's office has said that he will not resign, while the other cabinet ministers, about 26 of them, did resign en masse over the last couple of weeks. We've also seen a shortage of fuel, essential food items, and including medicines. Doctors have taken to the streets as well. And there are long power blackouts also happening, with the situation going from bad to worse. And this is the worst ever economic crisis that's happened in Sri Lanka since independence. We're going to get you regular updates on this story. Do leave us feedback on what you think of this whole story, and if you want more such whole stories on different topics, we'll bring in one whole story at least every week. Thank you so much for watching.